Most people never realize this. The future does not begin with action. It begins in the quiet moment when a thought first touches awareness. Right now, as you listen, something you think today is already shaping what you will meet tomorrow. Not symbolically, not emotionally, physically, energetically, structurally. We are taught that thoughts live and die inside the skull. Private, weightless, harmless. Small flashes that appear, flicker, and vanish without consequence. But reality is not built that way. The instant a thought forms, it does not stay inside you. It steps outward. It crosses the invisible boundary between inner experience and external structure. And the moment it crosses, it becomes signal. Not a metaphor, not imagination, a signal. Every thought you have ever carried releases information into the larger field of reality. Even the ones you ignored, even the ones you judged as meaningless, even the ones you tried to forget. Nothing you think dissolves into nothing. Nothing simply disappears. Each thought leaves an imprint that reality does not forget. You are not thinking into a void. You are thinking into an environment that records vibration. Your nervous system does not treat thoughts as language. It treats them as instructions. Emotion codes the instruction. Biology amplifies it, and the field receives it as frequency. Before you finish the thought, the environment around your future begins to rearrange. Not dramatically, not visibly, quietly, precisely, invisibly. This is what most people miss. Reality does not respond to the words inside your mind. It responds to the state beneath those words. You can think I want success, but the field does not receive the sentence. It receives the signature underneath it. The pressure, the urgency, the openness, the self-trust, the coherence, or the fracture. A thought carried in calm enters reality like a clear instruction. A thought carried in fear enters as distortion. Both move, both plant something, but they do not grow the same world. Science and spirituality meet exactly here. Neuroscience shows that each thought shifts chemistry. Chemistry reshapes the rhythm of the heart. The heart alters the electromagnetic field of the body, and that field extends far beyond your skin, so your inner state becomes broadcast. Not someday, not after repetition, immediately. The first signal is already enough to begin formation. It is the ignition, the directional arrow, the initial instruction to reality that says this is the direction. What happens next depends on consistency, and it depends on identity. Whether you continue sending the same signal, whether you become the kind of person whose nervous system can sustain it. But something even more subtle happens the moment a thought enters the field. It does not only move outward, it returns. The field answers instantly, not with events yet, with feedback. You feel it as a quiet shift in intuition, a change in emotional tone, a sudden sense of ease or unease without an obvious reason, an idea that seems to arrive from nowhere, a contraction that warns, an expansion that invites. The field always replies, but most people miss the reply because it arrives softly before matter moves. This is why the earliest phase of manifestation feels like nothing is happening, because everything important is happening where you cannot see. Probability reorganizes first, structure follows later, just as roots deepen before a tree ever breaks the surface. The universe always works in silence before it works in sight. And here is the deepest truth hidden inside all of this. A thought does not become powerful because you think it. It becomes powerful because you become someone who can hold it without distortion. The moment a thought leaves your mind, it builds a blueprint. But only identity decides whether that blueprint becomes a structure or remains a sketch. Whether that blueprint ever becomes a lived reality depends on one thing alone: your internal alignment with the signal you released. Alignment does not announce itself loudly. It begins as a quiet shift beneath the surface of your awareness. A change in how you feel long before your circumstances change. Reality never moves first on the outside. It always adjusts you first on the inside. And here is the point most people never stop to consider. If you truly understood what your thoughts set in motion the instant they enter the quantum field, you would never think in the same careless way again. Because the moment a thought touches the field, probability begins to bend. and probability eventually condenses into experience for the identity that matches its frequency. What happens to your thought after that moment is something very few people understand, yet it is already happening to you right now. Most people believe manifestation begins when results appear, when something visible shifts, when a door opens, when an opportunity arrives, when life finally shows a sign. Until then, they assume nothing is happening. But that assumption is precisely why so many people abandon their vision too early. The truth is the opposite. The most important work is done long before anything shows up on the surface of life. The field does not work through spectacle, it works through silent precision. There is a stage most never learn to recognize, a phase where a thought stops being just an idea and starts becoming a probability structure, a configuration of potential that quietly begins to influence what you will later call fate. All of this unfolds beyond the reach of your senses, not because it is unreal, but because your senses were never designed to detect probability in formation. In physics, this process is described as amplification. A signal does not remain fixed once released. It spreads, it resonates, it searches for harmony with compatible frequencies and moves away from conflict. It organizes itself gradually into a pattern stable enough for reality to later solidify around it. But in the beginning, that pattern is extremely sensitive. Doubt can distort it, fear can fragment it, over-analysis can weaken its coherence, emotional contradiction can scramble its direction. This is why the earliest phase feels quiet, not empty, protected. The field keeps the process concealed because visibility would expose it to interference from your old identity. The part of you that still questions, still hesitates, still retreats when certainty has not yet arrived. What feels like delay is actually preservation. Silence is not the absence of movement. Silence is the environment where delicate transformation survives. Every meaningful change you have ever experienced passed through that quiet threshold first. But here is where it becomes even more subtle. Your body begins to sense this reorganization before your conscious mind ever understands it. Long before a single external change appears, your internal state starts shifting without explanation. Your breathing softens. The emotional intensity around the desire loosens its grip. Your nervous system drops a layer of tension. Your intuition sharpens by a degree so small you might miss it. These are not random sensations. They are biological translations of alignment. Your brain receives micro-signals that a new trajectory is forming. It begins recalibrating expectations, adjusting emotional baselines, quietly updating your internal model of what is possible. But because these updates arrive gently, you may misread them. You might think you are losing interest, becoming less driven, less attached, less obsessed. In reality, you are becoming compatible. The signal no longer needs force to be sustained. It is beginning to match who you are becoming. You might think you are losing momentum. In truth, you are gaining coherence. And coherence is what allows probability to organize itself into form, not intensity, not emotional drama, not constant excitement, but steadiness. The field responds fastest when your inner signal stops fluctuating, when your thoughts and your emotional tone begin to agree with each other, not loudly, reliably. This is what turns a possibility into a timeline, not effort, not strain, but continuity of signal. What looks like a sudden breakthrough is almost never sudden. It is the visible arrival of something that has been arranging itself in silence for a long time. People were being repositioned. Opportunities were sliding into alignment. Barriers were dissolving in directions you could not observe. Probabilities were shifting while you believed nothing was happening. The universe does not reveal the preparation phase. It reveals the result when your identity is stable enough to receive it. This is where most people misread the process. During this quiet stage, your manifestation is not paused. It is not waiting. It is actively unfolding. You are not standing in line for the universe. The universe is waiting for your signal to become stable enough for reality to finalize around it. And your relationship with your desire during this phase matters more than at any other time. Each time you revisit the thought with fear, self-doubt, or insecurity, you introduce contradiction into the same field. The signals interfere with one another. They weaken coherence. Sometimes they destabilize the entire structure that was forming. But when you return to the desire with calm neutrality or quiet self-trust, the signal strengthens, the probability widens, the structure becomes easier for reality to hold. This is why this stage rarely feels dramatic. It is subtle in emotion, but powerful in formation. You are not meant to feel euphoric here. Euphoria spikes the signal. Spikes create distortion. You are meant to feel grounded, steady, quietly certain, because that is the frequency the field can safely build upon. If lately you have felt a strange calm around something you once strained for, if urgency has softened, if expectation feels gentle instead of desperate, if readiness feels quieter than you imagined, that is not loss of desire. That is stabilization. That is your signal becoming clean. That is the underground phase doing its work. And to allow your nervous system to register what is already in motion, you do not beg for it. You do not chase it. You simply acknowledge it. Not as a ritual, not as a wish, but as recognition. The moment your thought entered the field, probability began adjusting. What happens next depends entirely on how you hold yourself inside the quiet, because there is a stage in manifestation that almost no one learns to respect. Not because it is mysterious, not because it is hidden, but because it is silent. It is the space where the desire is no longer only a thought, no longer only a possibility, yet not fully visible as form. It exists between dimensions of experience, restructuring timelines, rearranging futures, stitching together outcomes that your senses cannot yet perceive. And during this phase, one principle matters more than all others. You must not disturb the field with noise. Silence is not superstition. Silence is structural stability. Silence allows coherence to remain intact long enough for reality to finish what has already begun. When a thought enters the field, it does not immediately harden into form. It begins as a delicate pattern of motion, organizing itself, learning how to hold coherence. In this early state, the structure is responsive but easily disturbed, not weak, sensitive. And this is where many people unknowingly interrupt what is trying to stabilize. The moment you speak a desire too early, you expose it to forces that were never part of its original formation. Other expectations, other identities, other emotional climates. Words are not neutral. Sound carries modulation. And every time your intention passes through another nervous system, it is filtered through a different history, a different level of belief, a different relationship to possibility. This creates distortion, not because people mean harm, but because misalignment does not need malice to interfere. It only needs difference. When too many interpretations enter a forming signal, the pattern loses precision. It begins to drift back toward the old version of you that others still recognize. Silence prevents this reversion, not by force, by containment. Your early manifestations do not need encouragement. They need insulation. They need a closed environment where emotional stability can deepen without being challenged by outside reactions. They need your steady presence, not a chorus of mixed reflections. They need the consistency of your state, not the confusion of competing projections. Growth does not accelerate through exposure. It accelerates through protection. What is forming inside you is attempting to root itself into your identity. That rooting requires emotional neutrality to repeat itself without interruption. Each time you speak from uncertainty, the rooting weakens. Each time you explain from doubt, the structure loosens. You are not sharing enthusiasm. You are dispersing coherence. And the mind confirms this pattern in a different language. When you speak about a goal before it is embodied, your brain releases reward chemistry. You feel acknowledged, seen, affirmed. But the nervous system cannot distinguish between symbolic progress and real progress. It registers completion prematurely. Drive dissolves. Focus thins. Energy that was meant to consolidate begins to leak outward. This is why people who declare the most often manifest the least. They convert potential into conversation instead of transformation. Silence, on the other hand, returns the signal to the body. It keeps the frequency centralized. It keeps identity from fragmenting between who you are and who you announce yourself to be. It preserves energetic precision. In silence, the nervous system retains a clean boundary between current self and forming self. That boundary becomes a container, and that container must be strong before the future can be held without collapse. Silence also sharpens intuition. Without interference, your internal guidance does not have to compete with external reactions. The signal becomes easier to feel, the direction becomes clearer, the alignment becomes easier to sustain. This is why timelines compress more rapidly in quiet phases than in expressive ones. Silence is not secrecy, it is incubation. You are not withholding your desire out of fear, you are safeguarding it out of intelligence. Many people believe they need approval in order to move forward. They confuse encouragement with alignment. They seek reassurance from others while ignoring instability within themselves. But the future you are moving toward does not require applause. It requires coherence. External validation feeds the ego, internal alignment feeds the timeline, and only one of those builds reality. The universe is not impressed by how many people you inform. It responds to how steadily you live the signal. And here is the distinction almost everyone misses. The moment you speak too early, you move out of embodiment and into narration. You stop being the frequency, you start describing it. But reality does not reorganize around explanation. It reorganizes around embodiment. When you explain, the energy rises into language and leaves the body. When you embody, the energy stays inside the nervous system and deepens its roots. This is why the most powerful shifts rarely announce themselves. This is why truly aligned people move quietly. This is why their breakthroughs seem sudden to the outside world. Not because they were lucky, not because something miraculous happened overnight, but because coherence was being protected while no one was watching. If lately you have felt an instinct to keep something to yourself, a vision, a direction, a desire that feels too alive to be spoken, trust that instinct. That is not fear, that is discernment. It is your intuition recognizing that the structure is still forming. It is your future self saying this must mature inside you before it meets other fields. And when the moment arrives, when the signal stabilizes, when the frequency matures, when your identity can hold the outcome without collapsing under it, you will not need to explain anything. Visibility will happen on its own. Manifestation becomes visible only after it becomes inevitable. And inevitability is built in silence. There is a turning point in every transformation when the universe no longer feels distant and begins to feel responsive. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your inner signal becomes clearer. Your thoughts always reach the field instantly. Response is never the delay. The only variable that determines how fast reality reshapes is whether your identity can sustain what you have initiated. This is why embodiment is the final gate. It is the moment when your internal signal becomes stable enough for the environment to reorganize around you without resistance. The field is not waiting for your desire. It is waiting for your coherence. And coherence does not come from wanting, it comes from being. You can think of the quantum field as a mirror made of probability. It does not reflect wishes, it reflects baselines, your consistent emotional tone, your habitual self-perception, the vibration beneath your thoughts. When you attempt to create from a fragmented identity, the signal remains blurred, contradictory, unstable, and the mirror returns mixed outcomes. But when you step into embodied alignment, your signal becomes unmistakable. The pattern clarifies, and reality has no option but to begin matching it. Identity is the anchor point of all manifestation. Every intention you have ever sent into the field is not waiting for more effort. It is waiting for a compatible nervous system. The universe does not deliver to the mask you present. It delivers to the identity your body is convinced you are. And this is not a philosophical idea. It is a biological one. Neuroscience shows that identity is not just a belief. It is a physiological state, a pattern of emotional prediction your brain uses to decide how the world will treat you. When identity updates, the entire system updates with it. Breathing shifts, posture recalibrates, emotional reactions reorganize, intuition sharpens, attention locks onto a new range of possibilities. You become predictable to reality in a new way. And reality responds to predictability with structure. Not because you are repeating who you used to be, but because your inner world has finally become stable in the direction of who you are becoming. This is why silence was never a weakness, it was protection. Silence kept your emerging identity away from outdated mirrors. away from the expectations that still belong to your past, away from emotional environments that could not yet recognize your future. Silence gave your new self time to take root before reality began interacting with it. But once those roots are strong, silence transforms. It becomes embodiment. Embodiment is not pretending, it is not affirming, it is not acting confident. Embodiment is when you no longer need to convince yourself of what you already are. It is when wanting dissolves into knowing, when grasping dissolves into calm, when striving dissolves into presence. And when your identity finally matches the frequency of what you once desired, the field no longer hesitates. The transition becomes clean. The resistance dissolves. Probability folds into form. This is the moment where thought no longer remains potential. It becomes experience. You will recognize this stage not through excitement, but through stillness. You stop waiting for permission. You stop chasing signs. You stop measuring progress. A quiet certainty takes its place. Your future no longer feels distant. It begins to feel familiar, almost remembered. You move differently, not because you are forcing confidence, but because fear is no longer managing your direction. This is when results appear without noise, not as spectacle, not as shock, but as inevitability. From the outside, people will say things suddenly worked out for you. They will call it luck. They will call it timing. They will never see the months of inner recalibration, the emotional releases, the detachment from old versions, the discipline of staying coherent when nothing outside confirmed it. They see the arrival. They do not see the alignment that made arrival unavoidable. And here is the deeper truth. Manifestation was never about pulling something toward you. It has always been about becoming someone new. When you become the version of yourself whose natural life already contains what you once desired, reality does not need to be forced. It simply follows. The field does not respond to wishes. It responds to identity. What you call manifestation is only the physical echo of who you have already become inside. And if lately you have felt that quiet readiness, that deeper grounding, that strange sense that something has already shifted, even if nothing is visible yet, that is not imagination. That is your identity beginning to match the frequency you planted long ago. You are becoming the version of yourself that the field has already been preparing a reality for. And from here, the path forward is not more thinking. It is more coherence, more embodiment, more presence. This is where the work becomes subtle, and this is where reality begins to move quickly. Not from effort, but from alignment. Not from desire, but from identity.